Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sabby, and this is Beautifully Broken. It's a platform I started to help heal my own mental health, and in turn, help other people feel less alone by sharing my tips, tools, knowledge, and guidance based on my own experiences to help other people. Switching it up. See what I did there? I did my intro in the beginning. Oh my goodness. Please be sure to subscribe and hit the like button and the bell notification so you're notified of when I post. I also have a podcast called Proper Madness. Much of my shorter YouTube videos that I've been posting lately are on Proper Madness now, so if you ever just want to give it a listen, if you want to take me on a journey in your car ride and you watch a YouTube video, you're like, wow, Sabby, that was a lot of really good advice. And you just want me in your pocket, and you don't want to see my face all the time, go subscribe to my podcast. As usual, I am not a licensed professional or therapist, so before you take any of my advice, please be sure to go talk to a professional first. I'm in a weird place today. Why is it so hot? Hello, beautiful, wonderful friends of mine. Welcome. Now, if you've seen the title of the thumbnail and this video, then you know what we're talking about today. I'll be honest, I really didn't have a plan coming into today's video. The last couple weeks have been very chaotic for me. I was sick, I was going through a depression, I was emotionally triggered and I had no idea. And then I also went on a little mini getaway to Joshua Tree and oh my god, it was so wonderful and nice. I'm definitely going to go back. I needed the quick little reset in my brain. I think when we're stuck in a routine all the time, in a little hamster wheel, it can get really easy to feel stuck in our lives, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, what have you. I am just gonna jump right into this video. I have been going through a lot of stuff lately, and if you've been seeing my last few videos, then you might notice that I've been a little off, maybe more tired. My train of thought maybe hasn't been as clear, but for a few weeks I have been emotionally triggered and I had no idea. So in today's video, I'm basically going to be going over what I do when I am emotionally triggered, how it shows up for me, and how I get through that. First and foremost, a lot of people might hate me for this, and to be honest, I don't really care, but it's just my opinion and it doesn't mean I'm right. I do not like trigger warnings. I personally think that in 90% of cases when trigger warnings are used, they should not be used. And if this sounds insensitive, then I'm sorry and I apologize, but for me, personally, I think we all need to be triggered to heal. I think when we avoid triggers, that's what trigger warnings are doing. However, there are certain times when it is necessary. When, say, someone from the other end of the screen that is looking at this, say, trigger warning, may not be ready to face their trauma yet. Maybe it's too fresh, maybe it's too soon. But there are a lot of cases where I feel like trigger warnings are overused. I don't think they should be used that often. There are exceptions to the rule, right? If someone has experienced a very big trauma very recently and they see a trigger warning, then yes, I think in that case it's necessary. But to place a trigger warning on every little thing, in my opinion, isn't necessary, because then you're just avoiding feeling whatever you need to feel that's been triggered. You can't avoid being emotionally triggered all the time, right? That's not feasible. It's not realistic. If you were to avoid being emotionally triggered, you would not be living your life. You'd probably be like Bubble Boy. You'd just be trapped in a bubble. You'd never experience anything going on. in your life around you. So you are going to be triggered at some point in your life if you've faced any sort of trauma, which we all have to some degree. And you have to know how to cope with it when it happens, how to process it, and what to do moving forward. I think being emotionally triggered is a little too taboo, or people throw it around way too casually. Like, I think people make comments like, oh, I'm triggered. When, like, if you know what being emotionally triggered actually entails, it's the most uncomfortable feeling ever, and it sends you into a downward spiral of negative emotions, and sometimes you can act out according to that and not even know it. So, recently, a really, really good friend of mine made a comment to me that sent me into a downward spiral, and this is the spiral that it sent me down into. And then, as usual, you'll get like a little tidbit of story time from me. She said something to me that really triggered me unknowingly. Like, she wasn't trying to be mean, she just made a very generic passing comment, and I was emotionally triggered by what she said, but I was not aware that I was emotionally triggered, because what followed afterwards was me being incredibly hypervigilant, very hypersensitive, and old trauma and emotional wounds coming back up to the surface, as well as me overcompensating with certain behavioral traits in order to minimize me potentially acting in a negative way like I used to. I feel like this is really generic and you're like, Sabby, what are you talking about? Okay, now that you know the symptoms for me personally when I'm emotionally triggered, me being hypersensitive means little things will start setting me off and giving me big reactive emotions without me realizing it and without me being aware that it's happening. Second is hypervigilance. I am already a very, very self-aware person. Now take that times 10. That's hypervigilance for me. I'm too aware of how I'm coming across. I'm too aware of how I'm speaking to another person. I'm too aware of how I'm showing up. Then I will overcompensate in certain behavioral traits, meaning if I am scared that I'm going to be bitchy to someone, I will be overtly nice in order to mitigate me even remotely coming across that way, as a means to avoid feeling uncomfortable with myself. So, now that you know what I've been feeling and going through, I can explain to you what was said and how it made me feel and what I was going through. So, this friend of mine, very close friend of mine, she's my best friend on this planet. Basically, she was talking about my platform, and she stopped and she goes, Sabby, I don't think you'll ever get canceled on your platform. And I sat there, and I was like, oh yeah, you're right. She was like, yeah, because you openly admit and talk about everything you've ever done. And I sat there and listened to what she was saying, and all of a sudden I just kind of spaced out, so I dissociated, and my head went to a what-if scenario. It triggered me very deeply because of an old wound that I have with past friendships from my young adulthood. When I was younger and I was in school, I would lie about things that I really did not need to lie about, just because I wanted to fit in. As you might be aware, if you're a longtime follower, I was bullied a lot in school, but that's no excuse to lie about things to try to look better in front of other people. It was a crappy defense mechanism and coping mechanism that I developed, and then, it perpetuated itself into some behavior that I really didn't like. It was what I would say attention-seeking behavior. Attention-seeking behavior is just that, acting out in little ways in order to get more attention, to feel better about yourself, so you feel validated in some way. And I lost quite a few friends because sometimes they would catch me in lies, and no one really respected me, and I don't blame them. I was wildly unhealed and really young and selfish. Then moving into my college years, I had one specific incident, a few specific incidents, where I was not thinking about how my behavior, my words, and my, just poor decisions would impact other people. I would say I was wildly, wildly selfish. I also was a heavy drug abuser and alcoholic. I was a big binge drinker. I didn't have a stop button. I did a lot of drugs in college to escape my own reality, and unfortunately, because of that, I had a lot of very ugly behavior that came out. When I would binge drink, I would say things to friends that I could never take back. They were things that I was keeping inside for a really, really long time, and I would let all of it come out and say some really hurtful, messed up things. I would manipulate people to like me by hurting other people and making them look bad. That's not good. I also had a few friends in college who, when I was going through a tough time, were there for me, and when they needed me, I wasn't there. I was very, very selfish, and I just kind of, it was like I thought I was in my own movie, and I didn't think about other people and what they might be going through, and that friendships are 50-50. So music festivals were big in college for me, you know, like all the rage. Like a lot of drugs, a lot of dancing. So I went to this music festival, and we went as a group in a limo. I went with all my friends. There was a boy there that I was quite interested in for a while, actually. And my other friend group, at this point in time, like, I don't think we were really talking very much. We weren't very close. I still was unsure of, like, what was going on there, to be honest. And what do we name this guy? This guy's name will be Dan. So Dan was in this group. I didn't really know him, but I had met him previously, and I was like, oh, hello, Dan. And we're all having a good time dancing, and Dan was dancing with one of my friends, and I didn't think anything of it, and then Dan started dancing with me, and I was like, oh, cool, Dan's into me. Okay. So then the whole rest of the night, me and Dan were like a thing. On the way back, me and Dan were like a thing. You can imagine what then happened afterwards, okay? Dan and I actually, after this, started dating on and off, sort of. It was like a real toxic situation for both of us. I was awful, he was awful. We were both at fault. So, when I got back, I noticed that these other friends of mine were being very, very distant. And I didn't know what was going on. I was completely unself-aware of what my behavior, right? I then find out one of the girls in that group actually liked Dan. In my defense, no one told me, actually. No one said anything. No one informed me that this other girl really liked Dan. I don't know what happened there or why. But I was blamed for that. But then they also brought a few other things to my attention, which was the fact that I was just very, very selfish, and they would come with me all the time to help support me through anything I was going through, but I just completely forgot about them, especially with Dan in the picture too. There was one specific night, now I don't remember this night completely. One of my college roommates at the time, so this was like a year later, and these girls still didn't like me. And so I'm laughing about it now because I'm like sitting there going, I really, like, they took such a small thing. Well, they took a series of things and just made it into this huge thing. So, like, everyone hated me, and I was like, okay, well, people hate me. There's nothing I can do. So, this will come back to what my friend said. So, at that time, though, they weren't the only people that I pissed off. Again, I outed one of my roommates for cheating on her boyfriend when I shouldn't have. I completely lied and manipulated other people and acted out all the time. Would get absolutely belligerent and drunk and want to have my own fun and not care about anyone else. So I just was not the best human, because I never did anything out of malicious intent. Truly, it was more out of just complete immaturity and lack of self-awareness and lack of awareness of the impact of my behaviors on other people. So a year or so later, my roommate's like, okay, they're having this party, these other girls. They're having this party at their house. Do you want to come and see if you can, like, work things out with them? And I was like, sure, let me see. So I go over there, and then all I remember is everyone was a little drunk. Everyone was screaming at each other. And they said some really messed up, hurtful things to me. And I remember leaving and going, I don't want to go back in there. I don't want to see any of them again. I just want to leave. And much of after that is kind of spotty and blurry to me. I did reach out to a couple of them, actually last year, and apologize because I just felt awful. And I carried that shame and guilt for the rest of my life, even now. It impacts how I show up with other friendships. But it was so traumatic for me because I felt isolated and guilty and shameful. Mind you, they had no idea like what else I was going through, so it's not anyone's fault, to be honest. But if I could take it all back, I definitely would. So when my best friend had told me, Sabby, you're never going to get canceled, which probably at this point might be true because I fully own up to everything I've ever done, right? I stopped and I was like, oh my God, what if, Like, what if all the people I ever hurt back then because of my really dumb behavior, what if they come back and all come after me and they're like, and they try to cancel me, they're like, Sabby, you're an awful person, you're a hypocrite, this and that, and just, I went down a spiral. And then at that point, I have recently been making a lot of very wonderful new friends who are emotionally mature, emotionally stable, financially stable. We have the same dreams and goals in common, and we all want to go somewhere in life. We all want to improve. We're all trying to be the best versions of ourselves in one way or another. And I could not be happier. And they're just truly loyal human beings, and they don't take their own stuff out on me, and I don't take my stuff out on them. In fact, we are all just so good at communicating, and I've even reconnected with some older friends. Like, I grew up, they grew up, and like we came back together, and I don't know, we just feel aligned in that way. So then the spiral brought me to, what if I lose those friendships? Not only was I scared about getting canceled on the internet, I was scared about losing these friendships. So then my behavior at this point was acting out of an emotional trigger for weeks, and I had no idea. Other heightened emotions. That's how I know I'm emotionally triggered. When my emotions are very, very heightened and my responses are no longer responses, they're reactions, that is also a key indicator for me as well. And when I am trying to and I also notice when I'm emotionally triggered, I tend to seek external validation a lot more. I would seek external validation from other sources that were not healthy human beings in any way. I just wanted to feel wanted, or post things on my stories on Instagram to get a reaction or get someone to like compliment me. And so I knew that when I was starting to do these things and I was out of alignment of who I truly am and my authenticity, that was like, okay, something's triggered me clearly emotionally, and I need to dig deep and figure out what it is. How I snapped out of the emotional trigger was difficult because I wasn't completely aware of it, but I had two friends kind of call me out on my behavior. One of them is a therapist, and she indicated to me, she was very transparent, she was like, Savvy, she's like, I feel like you've kind of been going through it like recently. If you ever want to talk about it, let me know. And mentally I was like, no, I'm not. Like, what's she talking about? I'm fine. Everything's cool. Like, I'm not going through anything. Okay. And then the more that sat with me in my head, the more I realized, oh, something's going on with me. I don't know what's going on with me though. But I was more aware of it, and so then I started showing myself more compassion. Second thing was, and this will just kind of happen sometimes we will be forced to be aware of the trigger. I think when we're not being honest with ourselves and how we're really feeling, and we feel uncomfortable emotions, but we kind of push them to the side. For me, I was feeling uncomfortable emotions. I wasn't pushing them to the side. I was feeling them, and I wasn't understanding why I was feeling them. I was on social media more. I wanted to watch TV more. I wanted to be less present, which is also how I knew something else was going on. So I started to become more present in my moment. Funnily enough, when I went away on my little mini getaway to the desert, I was faced with a situation that really triggered me. And my friend who was with me gave me a different perspective on it and made me go, she was like, whoa, what are you really reacting to? And I stopped and I was like, oh no, okay. I'm not reacting to this, I'm reacting to an old trigger, an old wound. So the more I started talking about it and getting it out, that is when I started to discover more. That's why talk therapy is so useful. That's why journaling is so useful. Or even having a friend that you can just talk to and be yourself with unfiltered is necessary, you know? And if you don't have that, journaling is the best. Or even just talking out loud to yourself. I've figured out so much when I talk out loud when I'm driving to work. Even just if I'm in my bedroom and something's really bugging me and I just don't know what's going on, I'll just start talking out loud and I'll figure it out. And then the last portion of it that really dove me into figuring out what emotionally triggered me was another friend of mine asking me some questions. She said, well, what triggered this? How are you feeling? What is your self-talk like? What's really going on? And it stopped and it forced me to be honest with myself. I hadn't been honest with myself of, oh, I'm really freaking out about being seen. I'm really freaking out about sharing my life and sharing my story because I'm still feeling ashamed of how I used to be. And then that in turn gave me a whole plethora of different emotional triggers to work through. Then once I was able to understand what the root cause of it was, I journaled. And then I did my hypnotherapy. And then I talked to myself. Because ultimately, I'm not scared of other people coming after me and canceling me. You know, I think at the end of the day, I was more scared and upset and shameful of my past behavior coming back because I didn't want to feel it again. Because a part of myself hasn't forgiven my past self. So that is what I've been going through lately and how I've been processing it. And what I did afterwards when I figured out I was being emotionally triggered. You know, I think just listening to what I've been through and how I processed it might help you, because if it just sits there in your head after watching this video, then maybe when you get emotionally triggered at some point, you'll remember, you're like, oh, wait a second. I'm having a really, really big emotional reaction to something that I should not really be having a big emotional reaction to. Something triggered me. Okay, well, what triggered me? And then just keep asking yourself questions. And after I was done processing the emotional triggers and the past wound that I really needed to heal, I felt this weight just kind of lift off my shoulders, and I got a good cry out. I wrote a letter to a couple of them, and I woke up this morning. This all happened yesterday. I woke up this morning and I got the best sleep, and I just felt better. When we're out of alignment of our authentic self, it's normally due to the fact that we're living in a hyper vigilant state of an old past wound. I think much of us still live there sometimes, and we don't really know it. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. It won't cost you anything. And if you've had any emotional triggers recently that you've been working through, maybe comment them below and let's share with each other what works. I think the more aware we are of this and the more we share our own experiences, it can help other people. I think sometimes we get scared to make comments, and share our own experiences and our own voices because we're scared we're going to get torn down. But honestly, if you share your voice and your experience and what you've learned, and you've forgiven yourself, and you've moved past it, there's no shame in it. There's no shame in sharing what you think. And if my story resonates with you, then I just want you to know you're not a bad person just because you've made mistakes and hurt people in your past. We will all hurt people. We will all let people down at some point in our lives. We're going to be the villain in someone else's story, but don't be the villain in your own. Forgive yourself. I promise you that the forgiveness that you give yourself is going to be worth so much more. Because hypothetically, say someone does try to come after me and cancel me because of some really crappy behavior that I did in my past. Well then sure, go for it. But at the same time, if I've already looked at my past and confronted it and forgiven myself, and I've reached out to the people that I know matter, that I really hurt in that situation, that's all I can do. And that's all that you can do. So other than that, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. And remember, you have to get through the eye of the storm to see the clear day ahead. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll see you next time.